In today's video, we're going to be talking about holidays and how we can help our holiday become a bit more successful or more comfortable if we're dealing with Achilles tendonitis or tendinopathy. Those terms are going to be used interchangeably, and we're just going to give some hints and tips on things that you might prefer to try or think about before you're going or packing your suitcase to take with you. Hi, I'm Ali. I'm one of the physios from treatmyachilles.com. We're an online physiotherapy service helping anyone with any kind of Achilles problems, be it from an Achilles tendonitis or tendinopathy, or from tears and ruptures, or anything that's had knee surgery and you need some help afterwards. If you would be interested in finding a bit more about our service or would like to book an appointment, please have a look at the information below. So dealing with an Achilles tendonitis or a tendinopathy can be something that means that we start to reduce our activity or we change what we're doing. We then may have something in our diary that we're really looking forward to. In this instance, we're going to be talking about holidays. Now, those holidays may mean more activity if you're going on a more active holiday like a ski holiday or a hiking holiday, or they may mean less activity if we're talking more poolside or beach. We're going to go through some different sections to see whether there's any handy hints in here to help with planning for that holiday. Those sections will include surfaces and things to consider, so whether there's hills, like we said, on a more active holiday, or sand, for example, on a beach. We'll talk about footwear and where you can see other videos on footwear that we've got currently available as well, and any hints that we've got for those. We'll talk about pain management and how to help with pain whilst you're away. And then we'll talk about what to do about planning before you go away to try and help you to be in the best position possible to cope with it. And then one of the main treatments for an Achilles tendinopathy or tendonitis is strength exercises and how you could maintain those whilst you're away. So the first category we spoke about was different terrains or different things we might find when we're away. So if we're now going to be starting, first of all, on a more active holiday, so something like hiking or mountaineering or something where you would be going on more of an incline. So you could even be in a resort that has an incline going up to, let's say, an old town looking over the area, for example. Anything that involves those sorts of inclines tend to mean that we use our Achilles a bit more. So when we're walking uphill, we're walking more on our tiptoes as we go up to be able to climb up. And as we come down, we have to use our legs slightly differently to stop our legs from running away with ourselves as we're going down a steep incline. So things that can help when we have something like this that we're not used to, you might think about packing some Nordic walking poles. So there's Nordic walking poles that can fold down, go in a backpack, and then flick them out and use them so they spread that load a little bit while you're walking up or down inclines. I've had some people say, and again, this is for short term only, this is not a solution to the rest of our lives if we have an Achilles problem, is to be able to think, can I walk sideways up a hill or backwards up a hill, particularly if it's not very long, it's quite a short incline. Again, can be more comfortable, particularly if you're then going to be on your feet for a lot longer after that. And then we could look at other structures in the terrains, things like sand or very soft ground. So that real soft sand where we walk through and it's a bit more of an effort to walk over, or pebbles and shingle as we're walking down towards the sea. Those sorts of things, again, are going to mean our Achilles have to work a little bit harder. So if they are sore and uncomfortable already, they may find that they have less tolerance of walking on those areas. If they're a little bit weaker already in our calves and our Achilles, or we've had problems in the past, again, we may want to see whether we want to avoid those sorts of surfaces. So when we're looking at sand, could you try and find the more impacted hard sand nearer to the sea and walk along that part? or a promenade or boardwalk and walk along those, so you would get through the softer sand or shingle as quickly as possible. We also might find when we're away, not just the terrain is different, but our step count may change. And again, we're looking more active holiday. Here are active days where we're doing an average a little bit more on that step count than what we would do normally. This is when we may start to think, okay, how can I break that up and do pottering? So we'll do a little bit of walk, little bit of rest, little bit of walk, little bit of rest. And that's looking for places where you might have a bench to rest on, a lovely cafe or bar to sit in, and then move on again. Equally, that peak in that step count load, you might not feel that day while you're walking and moving around. It actually might be the next day or the next morning that you start to feel some symptoms. It could be stiffness when we first get up and start to walk, or we've been sitting down for a long period and we get up and start to walk. And there's some things we're going to talk about in the footwear section that might be able to help this. So if you think about yourself being a box, and in that box is everything that you can currently tolerate. So from an Achilles tendon perspective, that would be a 0 out of 10 pain up to about a 2 out of 10 pain. And when it gets to a 2 to 3, it's sort of pushing the lid of that box. Now that doesn't indicate that something's damaging the Achilles, or in fact it's making it worse, but it's giving you an idea how much it can tolerate without then making your next day or overnight a misery. So if we can try and keep all activity within that box, that's very useful. So typical things that an Achilles tendon doesn't particularly like would be anything jumping, bouncing, jogging, raising up onto tiptoes and walking for long periods of time, like uphill, or things like long stretches, yoga positions such as downward dogs for long periods of time, or warriors positions. Again, you might find these completely comfortable, and that's completely okay if that's in your box of 0 to 2, but typically they can be things that you might want to think about. We have got, again, videos on how to modify different exercises like squats and lunges, how to modify yoga, how to modify Pilates, which again, you could find the information below if that's something you're doing whilst you're away. So in that box of 0 to 2 out of 10, what we're looking at is trying to keep all of activity at that point. So if you're going away and you're doing a little bit more, can you consider spreading that load over a period of time? So you might have what's a relatively high load day. So I've got a larger step count, or I've done my big hike that day, or I've walked on the sand that day, whatever it might be, or I've done 3 yoga classes in a yoga retreat. It doesn't matter, whatever that high load day is. Can you plan to then have a lower load day the next day, so you're evening the spread out and helping that Achilles? What an Achilles doesn't like is a peak in a load. So this is my normal life. Everything's great. I now gone on holiday and my load suddenly increases, or I'm now really poorly and then I go back to my normal activity. So that sudden peak in a load, and it might not be volume of activity. It might be that I'm now walking in a walking group that's much faster than my normal pace, or I'm starting to do something on terrain, so incline elevation, that I haven't done before. It could be any sort of thing that changes or has a peak in that load. And it could be multiple things. So you walked around a city break, your step count's higher, and then you go dancing in an evening. Again, lots of things adding together. The next day you go and look around an art gallery or a museum and you're standing still for a while. Again, a higher load sorts of activities all bunched together. So the more we can spread that peak in the load, the better. If you're able to plan, can you plan activities, even if you can't do them where there's a sort of day on, day off type theory? Can we be smart? So you might have an activity here in the morning and then a more restful afternoon, evening. And as we come into the next day, a more restful morning into afternoon, and then another activity that evening. So we're sort of cheating and trying to carve a rest day out at all. Other ways of thinking about load management while we're on holiday is delegation, and having a look at people that you might be going away with. Are there things that you can get away with not doing? So can you delegate the shop to somebody else to go and do if you're staying in self-catering, for example. Could you say, oh, can you get the hire car and bring it to where I am so then I can get in, rather than everybody going off to try and find it, for example. Anything where you're trying to use the people around you to do jobs, that would be very useful if they are related to the time on feet, step count, or things that typically irritate you. So examples could be standing for long periods of time and cooking, or doing something like we said again, looking around an art gallery. Can you find places to perch? Can you sit down so you're still doing things, but you aren't doing the amount that could irritate? And again, everybody's box is different. So some people is, oh, well, I can run 5 miles, but I can't quite run 10. And other people might be, well, I can't walk 5 minutes. So it's very different for different people. And that's why it's important to look at what keeps you in that 0 to 2 out of 10 during. But with an Achilles tendinopathy, what's incredibly important is the next 24 hours, because we might get an uptick in symptoms afterwards, and that includes sitting down for a bit. Getting up and starting to move is a really typical time of feeling it. Again, don't panic. You're on holiday. It's something you've planned for a long time. It's something you've been looking forward to. If it's the difference between 5 minutes of symptoms in the morning and 15, and going off and seeing the most fantastic thing that you've been looking for, go and see the most fantastic thing. You're unlikely to be damaging it by doing things. It might just be an uptick in symptoms instead. The footwear we tend to wear when we're on holiday or when it's hot weather is different to maybe when we are at home. So things more like flip-flops or shoes where we're sliding our foot in and we haven't got the support to hold it in. Or we might be wearing more flatter trainers or Converses or something that doesn't have that support, or a higher heel to toe drop. So packing some heel wedges, some tiny little wedges that you can put into the back of your shoe that slightly lifts your heel higher than your toe, may be useful for those days that you have higher step counts. Or wearing shoes that attach to your foot, so they have a strap over the front and or around the back, so they're holding your foot down as you're walking, so you're not having to grip with your toes and move at the same time. And there are some videos on different footwears that cover that in a bit more detail, which you can find the link below. Another option for looking at footwear would be to consider whether I'm going for a walk while I'm away, and can I wear different footwear to maybe the evening or when I'm more stationary, so if I'm going out for a meal. So the footwear for walking, you would look to try and have a higher heel to toe angle. This helps reduce some of the compression or the irritation at the back of the heel of the Achilles, where it comes down and inserts it right at the back of the calcaneus, so the bone at the bottom. So that higher heel to toe angle helps take a little bit of the pressure away, can make it feel a little bit more comfortable. So again, if we're in summer shoes, that can be really nice, because you could, if you're a female or you'd like to wear wedges, a wedged base shoe is absolutely fantastic. Or again, you could add those heel cups in for a more dressier shoe, or loafers or something like that. If we're on a hiking holiday, then good fitting walking boots can be quite comfortable to wear. We need to be quite careful sometimes that either people absolutely love them because they're really supportive and fitted, or they can have a bit of pressure at the back again, where that Achilles comes and touches the back of the heel bone. It can rub or cause problems. So again, checking if you're going to put a heel raise in before you leave, whether that's comfortable and that still has the fit of that shoe. Other people like to get more flexible walking boots, or cut a bit out at the back to give a bit more space inside, like an old trainer or something like that, cut the back to give it a bit more space for rubbing, again for the short term whilst they're out doing something that they wouldn't normally do, or have increased the mileage or step count. For skiing, I've heard actually really good things, and this is very anecdotal, there isn't any research out there, but people that have got a typical Achilles tendonitis or tendinosis have gone skiing, and because they're wearing that boot, the boot is holding their foot into a stationary position, and therefore they're not going up onto their tiptoes, and they're also not pushing off and moving very fast. So in fact, it actually settles it and makes it feel more comfortable. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be perfect when people are skiing. You may have to take your boots off sooner than you would normally do, swap to a pair of shoes and walk carrying those boots. Also, you cannot look for the unexpected. So if you are to fall, or you have a different skier that's getting in the way of you as you are skiing down, or you've gone off piste, or you've hit a bit of terrain on the ski slope that isn't quite normal or what you would expect, there may be some things that do irritate the Achilles in that instance. But generally, a ski boot tends to be something that tends to settle it and make it feel more comfortable. So our third section is going to be talking about pain relief and what can we do for pain relief while we're away. And it comes really into two sections. One, what can I do to directly relieve the pain around the Achilles? And two, what could I do to relieve any symptoms that are around the outside of the Achilles, so tightness and stiffness feelings in the calf or other muscles up that leg. So taking something that might be able to give you an ice pack is a good idea. Quite often in bars or pubs or hotels, you might be able to get ice cubes. So having a carrier bag or something to put them in. Or you may have a fridge if you're in an apartment you're renting or something similar, where again you could keep an ice block in and take it out, or go and buy just a packet of frozen peas from a local supermarket. With the ice, we're not looking at trying to change anything going on in the Achilles itself, because what we know when the Achilles is irritated, that if we were to zoom in on the fibres that are affected, we're looking at what's going on in between those fibres. And in between those fibres can be an increase of water content and an increase of irritant. That's also where blood vessels and nerve endings can start to grow if we've had an Achilles tendon problem for a little while. If that's the case with you, that can look like a bit of swelling. If we zoom out and look at the Achilles, it can look puffy, it could look lumpy. That's not the same as swelling as if I've fallen over and twisted my ankle. That's very different. So the ice in this instance is there to look at pain relief only. It's not going to be changing anything that's going on in that structure. So you could get an ice pack, wrap it in a towel first so you don't get any kind of ice burn or feeling of it going numb when it's too cold. And you might leave that on for 10 or 15 minutes or so, or again until it's comfortably cooled, not numb to the touch. And that's something that can make it feel a bit more comfortable without doing anything detrimental to it at all. Some people take some pain relief and painkillers. So over-the-counter painkillers that you know you can take, that you don't get side effects from, that you've been cleared by pharmacists or doctors, are normally quite a good thing to reach out for. Things we try and tell people to stay away from are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, so things in the UK called ibuprofen or Nurofen, and they can have a negative effect in the long term on tendon healing, or a delayed response in that tendon healing. So it's not something that you would want to get into the habit of taking on a regular basis. We do have two articles that are useful that you could have a look below. One on when is a good time to take anti-inflammatories for an Achilles tendinopathy, because there are certain situations this can be useful for. And the second, is it better to use heat or ice? The third thing for pain relief could be to look at the tightness that we talked about, the symptoms of feeling tight in the calf muscles or higher up your leg. Now, these tend to be symptoms of an Achilles tendon problem or a heel problem, not something that causes it, because we start to walk differently, we start to limp, we start to not like the pushing off, we might change our foot position accordingly, and then our calf muscles get a bit tighter, or the muscles higher up from that. So taking a golf ball or a tennis ball or a foam roller, if it's not too big and you can fit it in, can be something where you can self-massage and you can self-loosen off those muscles to see whether they can relieve some of those symptoms. So again, it's not the same as stretching or making a muscle longer, it's about relieving symptoms of tightness. You could also see somebody while you're away, consider a soft tissue massage or dry needling, for example, if you're with a good practitioner that's registered. With the soft tissue massage, it would be all about looking at the calf muscle bulk itself, and it would be about not massaging onto the tendon directly. If you massage onto the tendon directly, that can be and has shown to be more likely to be an irritant than a help. And then we move on to our final category, which is the strength exercises. If we're building up the strength, these exercises tend to need to be prescribed to you by a practitioner that is able to prescribe exercises, so like a physiotherapist, for example, because as you've probably seen, if you look on the internet, there are a million different ways to do calf raises. Do I do them 2 feet or 1 foot or fast or slow? Or do I go up on 2 feet and down on 1, or off a step, or with weight, or in the gym? There's a variety of different ways. So if you haven't got any idea about where to start, again, we've got some videos on different types of exercises, but this is the time to reach out to a practitioner to help you. If you already have these exercises and they're going well, then it's about trying to maintain it whilst you're away. And again, it depends how long you're away and how feasible this is. If you take a week off, you take a week off. Life happens and it's all right, as long as we then can go back into it and become consistent and frequent with them afterwards. If we're away, ideally, once a week's going to maintain it quite nicely. Twice a week is fantastic. And anything more than that, what a complete bonus. Some people are going away to places where they've got access to gym equipment, weights. They like to do a workout each day, and they may just keep up naturally with their exercises and keep progressing like in their program. If again we're thinking about our box and our ceiling of the box is being pushed open already, then doing our normal exercises may be enough to tip us over that edge. So you might have to dumb them down a little bit, knowing that life is a bit different. So for example, I'm doing weighted single leg calf raises. Well, I might take the weight away and not do any. And again, that's an example. Speaking to a practitioner that you're working with could be a bit more specific on how you could fit this in. And my suggestion would be, if you were to fit those in, they would be on your lower load days, or a very more restful day after having done them, for example. Sometimes doing movement is a really nice thing for the Achilles. Remember, we've got that irritant build up in between, or water content build up in between. That's the reason why we feel stiffness when we first wake up in the morning, or we get up from a chair and start to move. And then once we start to move, everything feels a bit more comfortable. The same as why some people might feel it at the start of a run and then they warm up and go. That's us flushing away that irritant. So even if we're not doing our exercises, just doing something that gets that moving and flushing away, even if it's a little bit easier than normal. So a handful of double leg heel raises up and down from the floor, for example, if that's something you know that you can already tolerate, might be enough without having to count reps and sets, just to get us feeling warmed up and ready to move again. And that's completely okay to do as well. So in summary, can you plan ahead? Can you plan ahead by giving yourself the best fighting chance? So the best fighting chance is avoiding that peak in the load. So if you know what that load's going to be, can you steadily increase that load over a few weeks to months before you go? Can you try and make your Achilles as strong as you possibly can to deal with that load? So you've gone to see a practitioner, you've been given the right exercises, and you've progressed them over time, looking at how difficult those exercises are relative to what you're doing. Can you plan ahead? Take with you any of the bits and bobs that we've just suggested, the heel wedges, the ice packs, the ball to massage yourself with, the Nordic walking poles, whatever it might be that suits you to take. Can you plan ahead with those? Can you look at your timetable while you're away and think, I'll do that excursion then, but not that one till then, and make sure that you have a bit more of an idea on how you might manage it if you've done a bit too much one day compared to the other.